the place that I recommend people to start is with curiosity, because that gives you an opportunity to demonstrate empathy, and to build trust by listening, and sometimes to offer a little bit of yourself. And curiosity to me is really, really simple. And I recommend just a couple questions for people to start with in the work context, although this works with friends as well. How are you? What are you working on? How is that going? And how can I help? Because those questions, when you ask them without an agenda, right? And when you do that regularly, people will understand your curiosity is authentic.
Welcome to the GenX Shift podcast, a show for Gen Xers who are navigating some pretty tough transitions and aren't sure how to move forward. I'm your host, Michelle Walter, proud Gen Xer, former lawyer turned entrepreneur, huge Jason Momoa fan, and margarita snob. And I've navigated a lot of transitions in my life, from losing my mom suddenly to a heart attack to starting my own business. But I often did it all on my own because I was too stubborn to ask for help. Now I'm on a mission to give actionable strategies to other Gen Xers so that they can find the confidence, courage, and clarity they need to make a shift. So let's rock and roll. Hey Gen Xers, welcome back to the show. Man, are we in for a treat this week. This is a really special episode for all Gen Xers out there who want to really embrace being a better leader in all areas of our life. And it's especially for all the lawyers out there, especially those who are on a partnership track or just wanting to embrace more responsibility in their roles as a lawyer. My guest today is Ben Grimes of BKG Leadership Coaching. And this really is a must listen for anyone who is curious about how you can develop the skills to become a better leader, especially at work, but also in all areas of your life. Ben's backstory growing up as a Gen Xer is a really compelling and inspiring story of overcoming economic challenges, growing up poor with a single mom who was a social worker raising 4 kids. His dad was a Vietnam veteran who became addicted to heroin during the war and died when Ben was very young. And he was faced with adversity after adversity growing up, and yet still had this belief in himself and his ability to prove the naysayers wrong. And that desire to prove them wrong is really what has motivated him to keep pushing forward, to never doubt that he was going to graduate from high school, that he would find a way to go to college even though he didn't have any way to pay for it. And so he applied for and got accepted into West Point, which set him up on this path of leadership in the military to becoming an officer, a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, and then eventually on to become a lawyer, going on to JAG, and then transitioning after he retired from the military to work in the Professional Responsibility Advisory Office at the Department of Justice. So a storied and long 27-year federal government career over which he shares with us the various lessons that he learned about leadership. And one of the themes in this conversation is the notion of generosity in leadership, which is something that Ben was instilled with from a very early age, from both his mom and from one of his elementary school teachers over in Germany, who had a real impact on him and how he saw himself and the confidence that he had in himself. Ben was determined every step of the way to keep moving forward, and most of all, to learn how to embrace leadership from a place of empathy and connection. So during this conversation, Ben discusses 4 values that drive his leadership philosophy and his business, what his definition of leadership is, 4 questions, which I found fascinating, that we all want to be asking our friends and our colleagues on a daily basis, and his insights and advice for anyone in their 40s and 50s who's looking to maybe start their own entrepreneurial journey. Ben's lifelong leadership journey will inspire you to embrace and step into becoming a better leader in all areas of your life, not just at work. So let's get into this conversation today because it's a good one, and I will see you on the other side. Hey, Ben, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for spending this time with me today.
You bet. I've been looking forward to it.
I have too. And I'm going to get into in just a second how we know each other because I always like to share those stories. But ever since you and I met up a few weeks ago in DC and talked about doing the podcast, I've been really excited to get to share the work that you're doing in the world on this platform. And we're going to get into your backstory, which is a really compelling on-ramped to how you're doing the work that you're doing in the world today around leadership. And so we're going to talk about both your transition from the federal government into your own business and that entrepreneurial journey and how leadership factored into that. And then we're going to talk about the leadership work that you're doing with particularly lawyers who are on the partnership track or looking to step into any kind of new responsibility. So yeah, I want to share how we met because I think I've said on every single podcast episode I've done that I feel like I have a lot of synchronicities in how I meet people. Like we come into each other's worlds and it's meant to be. So I think was this back in 2022 when there was that online well-being week or well-being day thing that the American Bar Association was doing? Does that sound right?
Yep. I think it was the Institute for Wellbeing in Law, the
Yes.
Wellbeing Week in Law, first week of May every year.
Yes. And they
Yep.
had like a big online summit, which was really
Yes.
amazing. And so I'm sitting there on like the first day scrolling through the names of all the attendees, like seeing who might be cool to try and reach out to and make a connection. And I see your name like Ben Grimes Prao, Prao, DOJ. And I'm like, oh, this dude's at DOJ. So let me reach out to him. I honestly didn't think that you would respond because I don't know if your title was on there or not, but like Prao, for those who don't know, it's the ethics office at DOJ. What does Prao stand for?
It's the Professional Responsibility Advisory Office, and it's actually one of three ethics offices within DOJ, but it was the coolest one.
Yeah, but yeah, it was the one that I was always afraid of. When I worked there, was afraid of in terms of you knew if something got elevated to Prao, you're like, oh shit, something's gone wrong. So I didn't think that you would respond because I felt like you were pretty high up, and I was just, I had left DOJ at that point, so I'm like, I'm not even there anymore. Anyway, you responded, we connected, we had a couple Zoom calls, and we just kind of stayed in touch online, and then we finally got to meet up a few weeks ago back in DC and have coffee, which was it was just great to get to meet you one-on-one. So I've been really grateful to get to know you and to watch your journey from being at DOJ to starting your own business. And so I just feel, again, like it's a big synchronicity in my life.
Well, it absolutely is. And this is a big treat for me because I feel like I'm following your path a little bit from DOJ into entrepreneurial life, into helping people through coaching. This is very exciting for me because you're a bit of my trailblazer. So,
Well, dear God, don't follow my path because my path is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I feel like your path has been just like whoop, straight up the mountain. Like you've just really exploded in the work you're doing. And I'm grateful to you for saying that. So thanks.
well, I feel like, as Gen Xers, I feel like all of our paths are a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Um, and I was thinking about this in preparation for our conversation, because you've talked about how your path was kind of unplanned, right? And my path has been largely unplanned. And I think that for us in our generation, that's just how we operate. Many of us operated. But today, like I look at my kids and I look at other kids and young people of the current age, and there's a hell of a lot of planning involved in what's coming for them. And I really feel I'm starting to feel like that's a big differentiator in how we approach life and how we approach challenges. And I think maybe a little bit why folks like you and I dove into entrepreneurship, and other folks have jumped into entrepreneurship without much of a net or a plan or anything that people would look for kind of traditionally. I don't know.
I, yeah, there's a lot in that I resonate with, and especially the kind of leap and the net will appear kind of mentality. And I'll be honest, there's been several times on this entrepreneurial journey that I'm like, maybe should have had a little bit better net before I leapt. And it is what it is. And I knew, at least for me, if I stayed a lawyer much longer, that I probably wasn't going to be around because I felt like it was actually killing me. So I feel like I had to jump because whatever was beneath me was going to be better than the ground I was standing on at the time. Some days I still am waiting for that net to appear, as you can imagine. But I think you're right. There's an entrepreneurial spirit about a lot of Gen Xers. I think it appeals to our sense of freedom, our rebellious nature, all of those things. And I think that makes a lot of Gen Xers well suited for the entrepreneurial journey. And I'm hoping that a lot of Gen Xers can take that cue, maybe from people like you and me, that, yeah, this is, I think we're kind of cut out for that in a lot of respects. It was fascinating though when you said that you felt like your life had been largely unplanned, because as I was reading your about me section on your website, from an outsider's perspective, it seemed like you had things pretty planned, that you were pretty organized and intentional about your life. So I want to rewind because I want to get the inside scoop here. Because you do have, as I said, a very compelling backstory that I think in hindsight has sort of set you up for the path that you're on now. But rewind for a little bit and tell us what life was like growing up for you.
Yeah. So I grew up in central Pennsylvania, in York, home of the peppermint patty.
Is
And
it really? I didn't know that.
so originally, not anymore. They don't make
Okay.
them there anymore. But like originally, at least that's the story I tell. Maybe not. It's also the home, and you'll know this because you're of our generation. It's also the home of the band Live, who I went to high school with. They were a couple years ahead of me, but if
Yep.
you're at
You
all
did?
into rock and
Yeah, yeah,
roll,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
should know Live.
Thunder
But they're
crashing down. What is
oh
that
yeah,
song? I
yes,
can
yes,
feel it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's also York.
Huh. Can I
Uh,
compete with you a little bit on
yeah,
that?
please.
So I didn't grow up in the town of Hastings, Nebraska. My hometown was like an hour from there. But Hastings, Nebraska is the home of Kool-Aid.
Oh,
Yeah. They actually have they used to anyway, I don't know if they still do, a big festival and like big bike ride every year to celebrate Kool-Aid days.
all right.
So
I think probably a little bit more cultural impact than peppermint patties.
I don't know. I love peppermint patties, and I wish, like, if anybody from York Peppermint Patty is listening, I wish they would make a vegan version because I really do miss them. They're really
Mm,
good. Anyway, we digress.
we digress. Yeah, so I grew up in York. I was the oldest of four kids, and my mom, for most of our lives, was a single parent. She was married when I was born, but my father had just come back from Vietnam, was and came back hooked on heroin, and kind of never recovered from that. And so they separated and then divorced when I was young. Um, and he also then died when I was pretty young. He died when I was about 13. He was 35 when he died. So when I turned 35, that was a big year. Um, my mom's raising me and my brother. She remarried a guy who joined the Army young, had two kids. So I've got two younger sisters, and that guy was a deadbeat. I have nothing nice to say about him, and they divorced. So my mom was then left with these four kids instead of just two kids. Now she had four kids that she was raising by herself, with no support, on a social worker's salary. And I am now, as an adult, supremely thankful and appreciative of how she was able to do that. Obviously, maybe not obviously, as a kid, a little less so. But she did an amazing job of instilling in us kind of appreciation for what we can do for other people. I mean, it's in her nature as a social worker, but that's the model that I had growing up. Um, yeah, and it was, free lunches and walking to school and no vacations. I didn't take a vacation until after I'd gotten married. Like it was like that it just was never something that was in the cards for us. But we always had enough food, not awesome food, but enough food, and we always had enough clothes, never name brand.
You
And
actually mentioned in your bio that you had hand-me-downs from your female cousins.
yeah, so yeah, I had two older cousins whose uh, whose shorts in the summertime fit me, and it was I think an easy way for mom to make sure that we had some clothes.
They just close at the end of the day. Who cares?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So those were the early days. Those are the early days. Growing up without a lot, that was that was the nature of things. And
And you lived in Germany, right, for part of your
yeah,
like early childhood.
when my mom remarried, she married this guy, and he enlisted in the army. And so we moved to Germany. I spent 3 years as a young kid in Germany. This was a fantastic opportunity. Also shaped me a little bit. But I spent 3 years in Germany from the ages about 8 to 12. So those late elementary school, maybe early middle school years. And my mom put me and my brother into German public school. We didn't speak German, but instead of putting us in the Army school on base, she enrolled us in the public German school, and it was amazing. I got to learn a lot. I mean, it was not amazing the first couple weeks, but as I didn't understand anything and just like cried my way home every day. But I got to meet people from local folks and other immigrant families, and I think I was especially fortunate because the teacher that I had was so amazing. And like a lot of elementary schools, I had, she was my teacher for everything. So Ursula Wietbrunner was my English teacher, my German teacher, my math teacher, my PE teacher. And she was not only an amazing woman, she was also a 1968 gold medalist in Mexico City. And
Oh,
she taught me how
wow.
to swim. And that's a big deal for me because I went on then to swim in high school, and I swam Division I in college. And I owe it all to Frau Wirt because she taught me how to swim when I was about 7 years old.
What
No,
a ripple
seven, not
effect.
seven, about 9 years old.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Have you, just out of curiosity, have you been in touch with her? Do you know if she's still around?
So when I graduated from West Point, I took 2 weeks. A buddy of mine and I took 2 weeks. We went to Europe to celebrate and debauch. Um, and I
Behave like young gentlemen.
yes, behave like young gentlemen. And I went back to the school that I had been at 11. And
Mm.
Frau Wirt, my teacher, was now the principal. And I called her up on the phone. I said, "Hey, it's Ben. I don't know if you remember me." And she said, "Oh, come see me at the school." So I went and saw her at the school, and she invited me into her office. We chatted, and then she went into her cupboard and she pulled out my last report card that I had never picked up, um, and gave it to me. And it was just incredible. It was just incredible that she said, "I always knew that you would come back for this."
Oh,
And I
wow. That
didn't
just
pick it
gave me
up.
goosebumps.
Yeah. Oh, she was so amazing, is so amazing. But I haven't spoken with her since then. And the reason that I didn't pick up my last report card is because my deadbeat stepfather was court-martialed out of the army, and we were, as his family members, returned to the States with 3 days' notice. And so my mom had to pack up at that point 3 kids and ship everybody internationally by herself with no help um, back to York.
Dear
Um,
God, your mother, bless her heart, she is
sh-
a saint.
she's been through a lot. She's been
Yeah,
through a lot.
yeah. What do you think was the biggest lesson, speaking of elementary school teachers, that you learned from your teacher?
I think it was a lot like the lesson I picked up from my mom, which was generosity. Um, she was so patient and generous with her time and attention. That is that is something that has stuck with me. Um, she was just wonderful.
I love to hear stories of people that have such fond memories and connections and impacts from our childhood teachers because, I mean, shout out to all the teachers who put up with us snot-nosed little kids,
Yeah.
in elementary school and high school. I don't know which is worse, quite honestly, but they can really, for better or worse, have big impacts on us. And it sounds like she is somebody who really had a big impact on your life. So I'm grateful that you shared that story.
No,
And you,
yeah.
oh, go ahead, go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say I'm grateful to be reminded of her. Every now and then I think about her and kick myself for not doing a better job of staying in touch. That's one of
Mm.
my challenges in life.
It sounds like she knows. I mean, if she had the sense that you were going to come back and get your report card, it seems like she knew that there's some kind of connection there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's nice if we can reach out to people and sometimes those connections in life that we just know are there, we can trust that. So maybe she'll listen to this podcast. Who knows?
Yeah.
So I also read though that you, and this is why I was surprised when you said that your life has been unplanned, because you write on your website that around the age of 12 you decided you wanted to go to West Point. Is that, am I remembering that correctly?
Um, I don't think I'm not. I'll have to I have to check what I wrote down. So as I remember it right now, I didn't have a plan. I knew I wanted to be in the Army. Um,
Okay.
and my, despite the fact that my stepfather was such a poor example and got court-martialed out of the Army, and despite the fact that my father had such a tragically poor experience when he was in the Army, I felt like that was like the thing that I was going to do.
Why is
And
that? What was that, like opposite pole essentially?
I I honestly don't know. Part of it part of it I think is I wanted to do what they had done, but prove that I could do it better. And part of it was my grandfather, my mom's father, had been in the Navy in World War II. Um, and for context, my mom is white, my dad is black. And my grandfather was was in my mind, well, not in my mind, he never really talked to me. And I don't know if that was because I was just underfoot all the time, or because I was black. Um, but I do know that he respected military service. And it seemed, as I look back, it seemed like being successful in the military was a way to prove yourself and earn respect. Um, and that's what I felt like I needed to do. Like when you're a poor kid, what you want to do is prove yourself and earn respect. And and I've probably um, that desire to prove myself and earn respect has probably also been a detriment in some ways. But when I was in high school, I think it was one of the drivers that pushed me towards the military. And so um, When I was a junior in high school, I enlisted into the Army. My mom was not very pleased about that. But I enlisted. I did one of those delayed entry things where you sign the contract, and then the following
Okay.
summer you're going to go and do your thing. And in between, I applied for West Point and got accepted. Um, and when I enlisted, I knew that I knew that I was going to apply to West Point because I had no other way. I didn't see any other way to go to college. West Point is free, except for the commitment that comes afterwards, but there's no
Yeah, there's a
money
different
involved.
price to pay. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a different price to pay. But the price that I was concerned about was the upfront, like how many dollars is this going to cost? Because I just didn't understand financial aid. I didn't understand how anybody pays for law. I just assumed that your family had money or the school kind of sua sponte, just independent, like magically offered you a scholarship. But I had no idea how that process works. And so I knew that if I applied and got accepted to West Point, I wouldn't have to pay for it. And it kind of fit with my Army theme.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah. And so I applied and fortunately got in. But when I enlisted in the Army, I had kind of decided I was going to apply to West Point, and I just had this feeling like I can enlist and my mom can be pissed off, but it doesn't matter because I'm never going to actually go through with this enlistment, um, which is a little bit crazy because it is hard to get into West Point, uh, and and I got in early admission, so I never applied anywhere else. I started an application to the Naval Academy, but I the only college application I ever completed was the one for West Point, and that is not a path I would recommend to anybody.
Well, it sounds like, and I remember reading this about you, I think that you never doubted that you were going to graduate high school, despite having a lot of factors stacked up against you, and that you were going to go to college, that you were just going to figure out how to make that happen. So, despite all of the things working against you, what do you think it was about you that contributed to that confidence?
I think it was the desire to prove people wrong. You know, a lot of folks who grow up poor, who grow up without opportunities, without resources, we just want to prove that we can do it. Um, and I wanted to prove that I could do it. And the same thing happened to me. This is a less kind of weighty example, but I told you I swam at West Point. I was not recruited. And in fact, I wrote to the coach. This was back when you had to write to people, right? I wrote to the coach and told him I had just gotten accepted. I was excited to join the team. And he wrote me back a letter that basically said, this is Division 1 and we don't have room for you. And I kept that letter for years. Um, and when I got years afterwards, but I certainly held on to it in the months leading up to arriving at West Point. And then I walked onto his team and earned a spot. And, I was not a national champion, but I won races and I was pretty good. Um, but part of that was to prove to him that he was wrong.
That I'm going to prove people wrong mentality is one that lands for me for sure. And I think for a lot of other people of our generation. And what I hear as you describe that is that that comes from a place of more sustaining motivation as opposed to coming from a place of I'm not enough. And so I have to prove. And maybe there's a little bit of that in there because I think we all, in fact, I'm going to go as far as to say, I know that we all have in us that not enoughness on some level. I hear more of the former though, and not so much the latter, but I don't know if that feels true for you.
Yeah, I was very lucky to know early on that I was a smart kid. Um, and and so when it came to academic performance, when it came to skills and athletics, I was a good swimmer. I was a fair musician. Like I, I could, I knew that I had some talent. I wasn't like the best, but I was good at a number of things. And so my not enoughness was much more personal and less about achievement and performance. I absolutely knew that I could hang academically. I had, all of the honors classes and AP classes and whatnot. I graduated within the top 60 at West Point after I got suspended. And
We're
um,
coming back to that.
and I swam in high school, swam Division I in college. I've done 2 Ironmans. Like I can perform outwardly. My not enoughness is um, how do I relate to people? I often, and it's, I'm 50 years old now. It's gotten better, right? But my not enoughness is, do people really want to know me? And if they know me, how are they going to feel about the circumstances from which I come, right? I mean, again, like I hate to harp on like growing up poor because like so many of us do it, but growing up poor for me left me with something that I carried with me, and I didn't realize it until recently. But I carry a pretty significant shame about growing up poor, and I didn't realize the impact it had on me until recently, and it still has on me. Um,
How does that shame manifest in your current day life?
so one of the very personal ways that it manifests is that I am not very good at keeping in touch with people, and that includes my family. Like I love my family, but I don't talk to them enough, um, because it, it's a lot to be reminded of. Um, all of our circumstances are different now. Everyone's, like, definitely mine. All of our circumstances are different now, but it's hard not to kind of be hit with the echoes of where we came from. And so, like with my family, I don't communicate well with friends, and like friends from college and high school and meeting people. That is a real challenge for me because like I don't want to be found out as the poor kid. Like I don't want to be evaluated as the poor kid.
Mm-hmm. Like an imposter
Yeah, absolutely.
undercurrent to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I just did an interview with Dr. Adia Gooden, which hasn't aired at this time, hasn't aired yet. It'll probably be up by the time your interview is up. And she is, in my view, an expert at imposter syndrome. And one of the things that I have learned, and working with my own imposter syndrome that shows up in many similar ways as you've talked about, is that it's so common. So many of us have it, especially because we have this inherent not enoughness. And so living in this fear, in this shame that, oh God, I'm going to be found out. People are going to realize that I grew up poor, that I'm not some fancy West Point graduate who worked at the Department of Justice, that I don't deserve to be here, like all those things. And so I think that's a very common experience for a lot of people. And I'm glad to hear you giving some voice and recognition to that.
Yeah, and it's tough because like we, as you say, like we recognize, especially those of us who have been through coach training programs and who help other people with imposter syndrome, like we recognize everybody deals with it at to some degree. Like we are all carrying this to some degree, but that doesn't make it any um, easier sometimes to deal with. And I just said to my wife last night, I was like I understand rationally how these things work, right? But like emotions are not subject to reason. They're not subject
No,
to reason. And
no.
and so these are still things that I feel, other people feel, and we just have to solve for that, for, in whatever way that means for us.
Well, and you said that the shame has gotten less, or you've gotten better about it over the years. Understanding it's still a work in progress, a lifelong work in progress, probably. But do you have any insight as to what you've been able to do for yourself, or how you've been able to work through that shame that others might benefit from hearing?
I think for me, a lot of my movement in this area has been on not just the the rationality piece of it. Like, it is reasonable to feel these things. Um, and when you feel them, that takes some of the sting out of it. I mean, to understand that takes some of the sting out of it.
Yep. To
Um,
acknowledge it.
Absolutely. And also, two other things. One, to build and revisit my list of achievements that are meaningful to me. And then the other thing is to listen to what other people say sometimes. I mean, there are times to not do that, but sometimes we do need to listen to what other people say, because a compliment may be deserved. And even if you don't think it's deserved, it's okay to catalog it and come back to it, and contemplate why that other person felt compelled to give you that compliment. Because seeing yourself through somebody else's eyes, getting a different perspective, can be really, really helpful.
Absolutely. And what I really loved about what you said there is that, first of all, you acknowledge it. I heard like three steps: acknowledge it, find the things, the accomplishments that are meaningful to you, to essentially build the evidence that you are worthy. You have done a lot of amazing things. You're not a fraud. And that piece of it, to me, is self esteem, which is deeper than the third piece, which is more self confidence that we get from external circumstances or people. Nothing wrong with that. And I think the self esteem piece is a good foundation because it's more sustainable. It's kind of an unshakable, I know my worth and value no matter what. And it can also help to have those external validations, because sometimes seeing, as you said, ourselves through other people's eyes can be a bit of a reality check for us and our limiting beliefs, that we
Yeah,
have.
I mean, I think seeing ourselves through other people's eyes is valuable in addressing our own limiting beliefs, but also in perhaps keeping our egos in check.
Yes,
Right? So,
yes. Getting feedback
yeah,
and learning
right.
from it.
And
Yeah.
and so I appreciate that, for both the validating and supporting impacts, but also the mitigating your worst impulses impacts.
Yes. I love that. So, included in those lists of accomplishments, so you went to West Point. Why did you get suspended? I want to
Yeah,
come, I didn't forget about
yeah.
that.
No, so and this is something I talk about a lot, because it was, looking back, it was probably the early seed of what became a legal ethics practice, um, later. You may know that West Point has an honor code. A cadet shall not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those that do. Um, and I lied. I got into, me and two other buddies. So this is 1991. Uh, we had all just gotten computers,
Yeah.
and you can imagine, like your 286 computer, right? Your X286 computer. I don't know if we might have just gotten. No, this is before Windows 95, well before. Um,
The
but
computers were the size of televisions,
Oh
by
yeah,
the
it was
way.
just ridiculous, just ridiculous. It was, you put the thing on your desk and it's like taking up the whole desk.
Yeah.
The screens are like 10 inches. Um, but we had, within the cadet community, we had a bulletin board system, right? Instead of email, it was like bulletin boards. And I and these two other friends of mine logged in on my computer, and it put us on some other cadet company's bulletin board system as plebes. This is like August of my plebe year, my freshman year. So I'd just gotten there that summer. And like any good freshman at West Point, we were like, the upperclassmen suck and the plebes are amazing. And we were like, those plebes are really going to eat some shit now because that's on somebody else's bulletin board over there. This is going to be hilarious. And as it turns out, it had my name across the top of it. It's like posted by Ben Grimes. And so we went,
The word metadata was not in your vocabulary back
no,
then.
no. So we go out to lunch formation. I don't know, the next breakfast formation the next morning, and all of a sudden it's a shitstorm. Grimes, what happened? What's going on? Who did this? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know how this happened. I don't know. And because it was not me who wrote it, but it was a buddy of mine who wrote it. And, after a day and a half of this, one of my cadet leaders came to me. He's like, do you have any idea how this happened? And I was like, no, of course not. And then I went back to him in the evening. I was like, hey, Cadet Co, I actually have some idea how this happened. I turned myself in for lying about this. Even though like the technical truth that I, originally was pinning my statements on was that I did not know the technical reason by which my account kicked over, like every
A lawyer
yeah,
before you were even a lawyer,
well, mostly just a liar at that point.
which is a lot of lawyers. So that's okay.
But I turned myself in, and I went through the honor board process, and I thought I would get reprimanded, and instead I got suspended. And
Wow.
it was
Did the other plebes get suspended too?
no. I got suspended. We all got demerits and had to do other punishments. But I was the only one that got suspended because they didn't lie about it. They were kind of outside the circle of. There was nothing tying them to it until I rolled on everybody.
You rolled on everybody.
Yeah, but it was the right thing to do. I got more punishment than I expected, but that's just what happens. You don't have any control over that. All you can control is what steps you take to, gird your own honor, I guess.
What did you learn from that experience? Don't get caught.
Well, yeah, like in some ways, yes, but also I really became an apostle for the honor system and having good ethics generally. I wouldn't have said that at the time, but I really do think that was the seed that then influenced the way I led when I graduated from West Point and became an officer, and the way that my legal practice evolved. Also a little bit inadvertently, but when I finally got into a legal ethics practice, I was teaching at the Army's JAG school. I was the vice chair of the criminal law department, and part of my teaching portfolio was professional responsibility. And until you get into professional responsibility and legal ethics, kind of nobody wants to do it. And that was me too. I was like, oh man, like the guy I'm replacing is responsible for ethics. That means I've got to do ethics. And I loved it. and I later would describe it as the way tax attorneys think about tax. Like they're just into it. And I'm appreciative of that. And I want nothing to do with it. And that's who I want to be for people who need ethics advice. I love it. I'm into it. I don't care if you like it or not, but I will provide ethics value to you. And you can appreciate that.
Yeah. Ethics is, I'm not going to lie. I mean, most lawyers hate having to do our ethics. And in the government, we have to do professional responsibility training too every year. Mm-hmm. In the federal government. So despite what most people might think on the news, like the government does actually have ethics training or professional responsibility. Or at least they used to.
Oh, yeah.
They still do.
Still do. Yeah.
God knows. But it was just because part of it was because it was often so god awful boring And bless the hearts of the teachers who were trying to convey a very dry topic. Like, we get it. But I remember that the teachers that we had come in to do those trainings, the best ones were the ones that kind of scared the shit out of you. Because I think that was sort of, at least for me, part of the the dread over ethics and professional responsibility. It's like, dear God, like, when am I ever going to have to deal with this? But if you really, really get down to the nitty gritty, you start to realize, oh, there's a lot of shit that I could actually get in trouble for, that I need to pay attention to. Little things that maybe you wouldn't think about. And so the people who knew how to scare the crap out of you, those are the ones that made the ethics and professional responsibility training really fun.
Yeah, because it's all about knowing how to connect the written rule to real life.
Yeah. Yep.
And when you can do that, then it's a little bit more entertaining. And so, even though I'm not actively, I left government, I'm not actively practicing, I still keep connected with the legal ethics world. I'm adjunct teaching for Columbia Law School. I am still part of the Association of Professional Responsibility Lawyers. So I still keep a toe in the legal ethics water because I am still a legal ethics nerd.
Yeah. Well, we need, I say we, I'm not part of that. I don't do anything legal anymore. I'm inactive in Nebraska just because I don't know why. But the legal profession needs people like you who really love it, because as with anything, the people who need to learn about these things need to learn about them from people who really love it. And so you need to be in that world doing that for other lawyers. We kind of glossed over a little bit a pretty awesome piece again of your list of accomplishments, and that is you graduated from West Point. JAG school, which for those who don't know is like the law school for Army folks. And you also, as an officer, you were a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, right?
Yeah, so right. So I got suspended. I got kicked out and invited back. So that was essentially a suspension for a year. I got turned back a year. I had to.
For a year.
I, I was gone for a semester. So
Oh my God, that's a long time.
it, well, so it, I already mentioned like my personal like not enoughness of being the poor kid already. So when I came back to West Point the following year, all of the peers that I had started with, and it's a bonding experience because it's so hard. All of them had gone on and done new things together, and now they were sophomores. I was repeating my freshman year, and all of the freshmen, my new classmates, were coming in during the summer to do what's called Beast Barracks, and they get yelled at, and it's a big bonding experience. But I was able to skip it because I had already done that, and so I was socially stuck between two worlds. My original peers had gone on. My new peers didn't know me from Adam. And I didn't have to do many of the plebe things that they had to do, like deliver newspapers and deliver the laundry and other things. So I would be, walking around like, "Hey, what's up, Chuck?" Talking to people, and they're just like walking around, yes, sir, no problem." Um, and so socially, it was really tough to come back to school. And then that first year back, or I'm sorry, before I left, one of my best friends from high school killed himself just a few months before I was getting suspended. I ultimately didn't get kicked out until January of that first year. So I went through the first semester. Towards the end of that first semester, my friend killed himself. I got suspended, went home. I come back to school. Shortly after I come back to school, my mom was arrested and sentenced to prison for 3 years. Um, she is she's done wonderful child rearing, not great in the men's selection department, and I think was hanging out with somebody who was storing drugs in our house, and she got wrapped up in that, sentenced to 3 years, and so I'm back. I'm socially isolated. I'm already feeling like my roots are not doing me any favors. And my younger brother is now at home in high school taking care of my two younger sisters. And I really struggled with whether or not I was going to stay at West Point or go back home. I was getting a nominal paycheck as a cadet at West Point, so I was able to send some money home. Um, and I had somebody at West Point, an officer kind of responsible for my company of cadets, who said, you know, if you graduate from West Point, you're going to be so much better off than if you go home now. You can go home now and get a job and take care of your family, but if you stay here, you're going to be better off. And that advice, coupled with my brother's amazing willingness to bear the burden of raising two young girls, convinced me to stay. So I stayed at West Point. I continued to do well. It may be no surprise that academically that year was my best year because I had nothing else going on in my
Yeah.
life. Um,
Can I interject on that real quick and say, was there any guilt or shame, or
uh,
what was that experience like for you with all of that going on? You're about 19 years old at the time, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
18,
that's a
18,
lot.
18.
Yeah.
I was 18. Um, yeah, tons of guilt, right? Because, and I couldn't go home very often, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I was at West Point. I didn't have a car. Like getting to and from was hard. Um, I wasn't allowed to leave that often. And so I couldn't be home very often. I could send some money, but not a lot. And when I did get home, I could see how much my brother and sisters were struggling, you know, still holding it together, but man, just barely. Um, and they had some help from aunts and uncles, but not on a day-to-day basis. Like on a day-to-day basis, my brother, who was a senior in high school, was getting these two young girls off to school and feeding them and making sure and so I would come home and it would be chaos as you would expect, and I couldn't I couldn't fix that. All I could do was like be there for a day and a half and do what I could and then leave so that my future would be brighter.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was hard, and yeah, it was hard.
Well, you'd kind of gotten out, right? Like it's sort of like you had gotten out of the the entire situation. You kind of gone on, and you did that yourself. And I can imagine that, there maybe there was this sort of internal drive to keep going, not just for yourself, but you know, coming back to your lessons of generosity that you learned from your mom and your teacher, that if you build a better life for yourself, maybe how could that help your family in the long term?
Yeah,
Was that?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And anybody who has gotten out knows what it's like to see and to live in two different worlds. Um,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
making the transition back and forth, you know, it was hard emotionally to make the transition back and forth. It was hard to invite friends home. Like I couldn't invite anybody home. Like,
Yeah.
uh, and that made it hard to make and have good friends. Um, so
It's so discombobulating when you are never fully in both worlds, like one leg in each. 'Cause I different circumstances, and I relate to what you're saying. Just having grown up in Nebraska, also fairly economically challenged, never similar, not never really wanting for anything. We were
mhm,
provided for, but we weren't the by any stretch the richest kids in town, not even close. And then going to DC, like kind of getting out of Nebraska when nobody else in my family had ever done that. And still to this day, feeling that tension between those two worlds. Because yeah, it's a hard line to walk.
yeah. I, as you were as you were saying that, I was reminded, you know, of one kind of emblematic memory of being in middle school in York, Pennsylvania, and poor. You know, my mom uh, at one point was driving this primer gray, old, used blue vinyl seats, something or other. And, the car could not have been worth anything then. And she would drop us off at school, and that thing would backfire like a John Hughes movie. It was just like the worst. It was just the worst. And, like thinking about what it sounds like to be poor, like what it feels,
Yeah. Yeah.
and to be to become the center of attention when that happens, uh, and then to get out and to be able to live in a nice house or drive a nice car or have nice things, it it feels foreign,
Mm.
and a foreignness that even now is hard to get used to.
Mm. Yep. I am just, every cell in my body is sitting here going, yep, yep, yep. Because that could be a whole nother podcast episode around it's trauma.
Right.
Like the trauma of money in so many different ways, right? And growing up of limited financial means, poor. I hesitate to call myself poor. I don't know why. We definitely had limited financial means. Um, but that shit that gets ingrained in your soul, in your body, in your cells, in your tissues from a very early age, not to mention what we inherit from our parents genetically, epigenetically,
Hmm.
and their trauma around money growing up, because it sounds like both of our parents had their own financial struggles long before we came along on
Hmm.
the scene. And so all of that's to say is it's just like, yes, like it feels, as weird as this sounds, it can feel very uncomfortable to have money. Not even like all that much money, because there's not, it's a pretty low bar to start with. So even
Right.
having like a little bit more money and a little bit more success, and especially to do better than our parents, not from a like that our parents did bad by any stretch, but just to kind of keep raising the bar, getting out, that can all feel extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ugh, man. Okay. Yeah. That was just, that landed for me in a big way. Um,
Well, and
Ooh, okay.
but it's interesting that you hesitate to use the word poor. And as I hear you say that, I wonder if it is a little bit, it feels a little bit like an indictment of our parents.
Yeah, I think there could be some of that. And I think there could also be uh, recognition, especially with the work I've done over the last several years around privilege.
Hmm.
And so recognizing that even growing up in rural Nebraska in a trailer down by the river,
Hmm.
about as redneck as you, almost as redneck as you could be. Like there's a little like layer of redneck beneath that. But I mean, for God's sake, we had a horseshoe pit across the gravel road. Like, so I think even in that, I still had privilege, right? I had a roof over my head, I had clothes, I had food. And so I think to me, for me, poor connotes something even below that,
Mm.
like maybe people who weren't fortunate to have clothes or clothes that didn't have holes or to have 3 meals a day and ice cream and Dairy Queen on the weekend, right? Like,
Hmm.
so I think that's more my hesitancy to say I'm poor, and but that's just my perspective on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, money conversations for another day, but those are huge. Those are huge, and I kind of want to put a pin in that because I think I'm pulling some threads together of your whole leadership journey here. So I want to put a pin in that. But I want to come back to, because we started talking about you getting suspended from West
Right.
Point and how you became a Black Hawk helicopter
Yeah.
pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you graduate from West Point, you get to select your branch of service. You could be an infantry officer, an armor, tank officer, um, a finance corps officer, but your selection is based on your class rank. And I was ranked high enough that I got my first choice, which is to be an aviation officer. And then within that, I got to choose the platform, the helicopter platform that I would fly, and I chose Blackhawks. So I graduated. I spent 2 weeks having fun in Europe, and then my buddy and I went down to Alabama for flight school, and I spent 18 months in southern Alabama learning how to fly helicopters, and went off to South Korea and flew there, and came back. Spent a year in South Korea, came back to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and while I was at Fort Campbell, I realized that I was not going to fly helicopters for the rest of my life. Um, Even within the Army, the more senior you get as an officer, kind of the further away you get from the cockpit. And like a lot
Yeah.
of kind of professions, you, you start to manage more rather than do. Um, so the doing of flying was something I wasn't going to be able to do long term, even though it was a lot of fun, as you can imagine. And about the same time, I realized that I heard about this program that the Army has to pay for law school for about 2 dozen officers every year. And I was like, I love getting paid to go to school. Like, let me apply for this.
Had law, so it didn't sound like law school had even been on your radar until then.
No, no. West Point has at the time had a 1 semester requirement for a law course. So I took Law 401, whatever it is, 403, as a cadet at West Point because it was required. And I did well, but I was a nerd, so I did well in a lot of things. And it never crossed my mind again until I read this article. I was like, yes, I could go to school for 3 years and get paid for that. Yeah, let me apply for this.
Now that is where your life was unplanned. Like that now I see it.
Yeah.
Like that was just kind of a what that's, and I relate to that. I don't know what else. I'll go to law school.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
whatever.
let's check this out. And so I applied to law school, and I got accepted a couple places, and I ended up going to New York University in New York City because the woman I was dating at the time lived in Jersey City across the river. And I was like, well, I can get close to her. Um, and that didn't last. That she is great, but that relationship was always not the right one, I think, for either of us. And it took me a little while it took me a little longer to figure it out than it took her. But I did figure it out. And luckily, while I was at law school, I met my wife, my now wife. Um, so it all worked out. Um, but it was very much unplanned. And I thought, I got to law school. I was an officer in the Army. I was like, well, I'm going to focus on humanitarian law and the law of war, and I'm going to study all of that stuff. And I did. And after law school, I went back to the Army and never touched law of war again. And instead, I became a criminal litigator. So I was doing prosecution work. I was doing defense work. I ended up teaching. Um, and the last year of my Army practice was doing intelligence law, which was very interesting, very different. And I did not like it at all. I like to tell people that I love the tasty freedom, the tasty sausage of freedom, but I want no part in making it.
Don't want to see how it's made.
Yeah, it was just not for me. Um,
Ooh, yep, I hear that.
but while
Yeah.
I was teaching, as I said earlier, while I was teaching, I got into this professional responsibility work, the ethics work. And
Hmm.
so then when I retired from the Army, I transitioned straight away into the Department of Justice. I took about 5 days off, took a long weekend, and started a new life as a ethics attorney for DOJ.
So you were at Preo that whole time?
I was at Preo, yeah, I was at Preo for 7 years,
Okay. Yeah.
just shy,
So,
yeah.
oh, okay, yeah, 7 years. I would have thought longer. I'm just trying to do all the math in my head. So how long were you in the Army total?
In the Army for 20 years.
Oh, 20. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So when you say you retired, it was full on
Yes, yeah.
retirement.
So
Yeah.
20 years, at 20 years and 4 months, I retired
Hmm.
and went straight away to DOJ,
Yeah. And what did you retire as? What rank?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Okay. So because I want to, again, I'm like planting all these little seeds of the relationship leadership picture for you and how they relate to each other. So, what do you think were your biggest lessons that you learned about leadership from being in the Army?
It is probably not what most people think, right?
Mm,
Um, my my business values right now, I keep them in front of me: trust, transparency, empathy, and passion. And those are things that I picked up from leaders that I worked with in the Army. That is how, that is essentially how I was taught to lead, by building relationships with people. Um, you can tell people what to do, and there is a time for that. But when you need to tell somebody what to do with, and brook no hesitation or argument about it, that's the wrong time to start building trust. And so all of the work that we do, that we did as that I was associated with as a leader in the Army, was about building trusting relationships so that when the time came to give orders that needed to be followed right now, they would be, because the people involved trusted each other.
mhm.
And the same is true now. So now I'm working with lawyers and law firms, right? And so when you're in trial and you only have, you just got a motion dropped on you tonight, and the judge is not being very flexible, and wants your response, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, and you've got a lot to do. Now is not the time to have a back and forth about what the expectations are, or what I'm going to be doing versus what you're going to be doing. We needed to build that relationship weeks and months ago, so that now I can turn to you and say, look, Michelle, I need you to do this right now. And I need you to drop everything else that you're doing. And this is what I need you to do. I don't even have time to explain why. If we have a relationship built on trust, where we know each other, then it's going to be much easier for you to do that than if I've been the jackass who's throwing staplers at you and yelling at you and not giving you any useful or constructive feedback on how to improve your work, so that you're giving me what I actually need. If we're creating this relationship, and I am giving to you, I'm being generous to you and helping you grow, when it is time to have no conversations and I just need you to do what I told you to do, we can do that.
And that's why it seems like the transparency piece is so critical too, because you can't really have trust without transparency. It's not trust but verify,
Right.
it's be transparent and be trusted.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, that transparency has two components. It's informational transparency. And so when I have time, I'm going to explain to you why I'm making the decisions I make. We're going to talk through what's happening, how everything fits together. But it's also transparency about who I am. It's often, so that's a piece of authenticity. Um, if you don't know what drives me, if you can't trust that I have good intentions, because you don't know me, then there is no transparency. Um, and so I really do need to, we as leaders, as lawyers, and we can talk about this, but I believe that we all have not just the opportunity, but the obligation to be leaders as lawyers.
Mhm.
When we're doing that with authenticity, it's much easier to build relationships that will enable our teams to work more efficiently and happier and have better engagement, and wellness goes up, and turnover goes down, all of those things.
Yeah. And the piece that doesn't get, I think, talked about a lot and definitely not heard about a lot, either in the military or in other professions like the legal profession, is that empathy piece. So, talk to me more about the empathy piece and how important that is to developing leadership.
So the empathy piece is, I think, it's almost it's not quite the flip side of the coin of personal authenticity, but it's being open to someone else's authentic self and circumstance. It's it's pretty selfish of me to only want to be transparent about what matters to me and not to be empathetic and interested in what matters to you. And
Mhm.
so our relationship, I think, is strengthened when I am authentic, but it is absolutely critical for us to have a great relationship if I'm also interested and empathetic in what in your experience, what you bring to the table, to your goals and strengths and needs. All of those things matter in building this relationship that's going to enable us to do whatever it is that we're doing together.
Mhm. Yeah, and it sounds like these are all pieces that are moving together, that there isn't necessarily a place that you can identify to start. Like, let's start with empathy or let's start with transparency. They all have to be developing at the same time. And then how does that translate into the action piece?
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right that they all work together. And the place that I recommend people to start is with curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
because that gives you an opportunity to demonstrate empathy, and to build trust by listening, and sometimes to offer a little bit of yourself. And curiosity to me is really, really simple. And I recommend just a couple questions for people to start with in the work context, although this works with friends as well. How are you? And just like that's it. How are you? What are you working on? Because it might not be something that I assigned you to do, right? But I'm curious. What are you working on? How is that going? And how can I help?
Beautiful.
Because those questions, when you ask them without an agenda, right? This is not me asking to check up on the things that I asked you to do last week. You have to ask them without an agenda. And when you do that regularly, people will understand your curiosity is authentic. Um, but it gives them a chance to share with you whatever they're comfortable sharing. So how are you? They that's that opportunity for you to be empathetic and for them to be authentic. What are you working on shows interest in their growth. How is it going again? And how can I help? Not, and the question is not, would it help if I did X, Y, and Z? You have to leave the autonomy of the answer with them. How can I help? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I just appreciate you listening. Maybe you could introduce me to Michelle because I would really like to work with her on a project. And so asking those simple questions, just being curious in that simple way takes no time at all. It takes You can have that conversation in 3 minutes. Um, and if you're checking in with a friend over coffee, you can expand it, of course. But it is such an easy set of questions that I think are so valuable in deepening relationships, creating and deepening relationships with folks that we are spending our time with.
Absolutely. Personally and professionally. I
Yes.
mean, think how much better or deeper conversations would go both with coworkers and with friends if instead of just saying, "How you doing?" we ask those additional three questions, because that shows that curiosity. It shows a desire to connect, that empathy piece, and it allows the other person to, as you said, be transparent and be authentic, and can start to build the foundation for that trust component. I love those four values that you have. I think those are really powerful. Is there anything else from DOJ, just your time at DOJ in working in the ethics office, that you learned that added to your perspective on leadership?
So I loved my time at DOJ, and so the next thing that I'm going to say is not to disparage the department, because the department, I think, like many other legal organizations, is in the same boat as they are, in that there, what I saw was the need for leadership support as people are growing professionally. I grew up with that in the Army. Every time I got promoted, every time I took a new job, there was a course or something related to leadership that prepared me for the next thing every time. And at DOJ, at your law firm, at every other organization in the world, practically, it's like you're great at doing research, you're great at drafting briefs. Now I want you to supervise other people, and I want you to
Yep.
stop doing as much of the thing that you're good at and start doing this other thing that we haven't trained you to do.
Yep.
And so I saw that at DOJ, less so within Preo, um, but within the department, and certainly outside the department, I got to see. I was working in the ABA. I was interacting more with folks outside the department. I've seen my peers and colleagues from law school grow up professionally, and I know that our profession, your former profession of law, we don't do a good job of preparing
Mm-mm.
people to take the next step in responsibility. And so when people go from associate to partner, it's like, great, okay, you've been writing briefs for other people and doing research for other people. Now I want you to supervise the development of these 6 associates. I want you to bring in new business. I want you to sit on the hiring committee. Um, and these are things that we're just not ready for.
Yeah, I am going to take that one step further and kind of double down on that because I was privileged and blessed to have amazing managers during my time at DOJ. And I also saw managers that were not so great, and that's not a dig on them as a person.
Right.
It's recognizing, as you said, the fact that I think both in the government and from my experience at the law firm too, that whether you're talking about managers or partners, people are getting promoted or getting those titles based on their substantive experience. They did some trial, they knew how to bill a bunch of hours, maybe they're really good at schmoozing with clients, whatever it might be. So often, the missing piece of that is actually the leadership piece.
Yes.
And I want to get to your definition exactly of what leadership is. In my experience, I think the missing piece of that leadership component is how do you actually develop relationships with the people that you are working with? And how do you foster their leadership skills? So, yeah, I just wanted to double down on that a little bit because I think it is a huge, huge problem in the legal profession as a whole, whether you're talking about governmental agencies or law firms. So, what is your definition of leadership?
I think that leadership is the understanding that we have an obligation to care for the people that we work with, to help them grow, and to inspire them to perform at their best.
I like that definition a lot because it's not just about managing or kind of taking the lead. It's also about encouraging other people to step into leadership for themselves and for others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The classic, like the the classic way that people talk, like that military leaders talk about leadership now, is as a to be a servant leader, to care
Hmm.
for the people that you work with. And um, I think that's a great way to start shifting our focus. I espouse something that I refer to as empowering leadership, which is both the care and the inspiration and growth support for folks. So combining those two kind of focus areas. I need to care for you because you don't work for me. You are my I'm responsible for you. And together we produce this thing. And so I've got to care for you for that. But I also, because this is how I think about leadership, I have an obligation to make sure that you are growing in whatever way is most important to you. And that means I'm looking for ways to give you new opportunities, to get you to the right classes, to challenge you, to get outside your comfort zone a little bit sometimes. That also means I need to know what your goals are, and so I really do need to be curious about you and where you see yourself going professionally, personally.
What do you think are maybe one or two, if you can narrow it down to that, of the biggest stumbling blocks, limiting beliefs, mindsets, whatever you want to call them, that hinder people stepping into that more holistic view of leadership?
I can certainly speak to lawyers, and I think this is not uncommon in other industries. For lawyers, one of the challenges is the profession itself. And by that I mean how we're trained in law school and how we're rewarded in our early practice. And this is starting to change at the law school level. But when you and I went through law school, and when many folks, when many young aspiring lawyers are going to school now, they're going to graduate in a setting in which the only thing that matters is how well they performed, which is fine. Like that's school, right? That's a little bit how school works. But this is not undergrad and this is not high school. This is preparation for a profession. And so I think it should be a little bit different personally. But law school is all about how well you perform. Um,
In comparison to other people, by the way,
yes,
it's all about, I think, a rather unhealthy level of competition. There can be healthy competition. I think the competition in law school, med school, very unhealthy.
yes. And in a lot of places, it's a zero sum, right? It's graded on a curve. And so we can only have so many A's or A minuses or B's. And so it's zero sum. If I get an A, you might not get an A. And then the same thing happens when you transition out into, especially into law firm life, where you and I are judged on our individual contributions and or hours billed, and we're a little bit in competition with each other because there can only be so many partners. And so in order to move up, I have to make sure that I'm moving faster than you. So it's always it can feel like a zero sum game. Now, if you take a step back, even in the law firm world, if you take a step back and have a perspective that we are all supporting this law firm together and change that from a competitive mindset to a cooperative, collaborative mindset where we all win when you win, when I win, when we can win together, um, then it's easier for us to support each other growing up as we grow up professionally. And so as young associates, I might say, hey, Michelle, like I am swamped right now. I overheard you say last week that you could use some, like you're worried about making your hours this month. Could you help me with this project? And, right, like imagine that.
Yeah,
And once we make partner, it can feel very cutthroat because we're worried about who gets the origination for this, like who's going to get credit for bringing this work in. Um, and so, but the same principle applies. Like, are you working for you? Are you working for the firm? Are you working to develop the associates that are supporting you? Like, what's your focus? And I just happen to believe that the best, most successful um, partners are going to be the ones that have a broader perspective, that it's not just all about me. So to circle back to your question, I think one challenge is it's not anybody's fault. That's just like the circumstance that we grow up in professionally is our environment. Um, and the other piece of it is uncertainty and lack of confidence that we can do it because pop culture kind of suggests to us that great leaders are born. Like you're just, oh, he's just a born leader, right? And
that's so true.
and the truth is, um, leadership is a set of skills. Like e- even demonstrating empathy is a set of skills. And we like to think that empathy is something that you either have or you don't have. But I don't know about you, but I play around with ChatGPT a lot, and I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure there's no soul behind it, but damn, it can articulate some empathetic responses. And
Yeah.
so the same thing is true with us. We may not feel naturally empathetic, but we can provide empathy to other people if we practice the right skills.
A couple of things I want to circle back to in that. First of all, I love that you pointed out this messaging we get about, so you're either born a leader or you're not. That's such bullshit, because at least the coaching school that I went to, that it was a heavy emphasis on leadership, and leadership in the broader sense of everybody is a leader in some facet of their life, whether you're talking at home, at church, on the soccer field, in your friend group, or at work. So, and embracing a more holistic definition of leadership, as you've pointed out, invites us into that, because then it's leadership isn't about like dictating and telling people what to do and being like the big kahuna. It's about developing the best and getting the best, and developing that empathy and connection among everybody. And so I love looking at leadership on a broader level and seeing how can we each show up as a leader in our life, and where can I cultivate those skills to be a better, more empathetic, connecting leader. The second thing I wanted to say, when you were talking about the example of being in a law firm and having a more communal is the word that was coming to me, instead of unhealthy competitive, which honestly is a symptom of the capitalist system that we have, right? Like, it's just, everything is just a funnel down from these larger systems, and the legal system is a symptom of the capitalist system, and it's all about who can make the most money and be the biggest firm and the fanciest partner and all of those kinds of things. When I was in a law firm briefly, one of the reasons that I did not do well there, I did not enjoy that experience, was because coming from the federal government, where there's some incentive to be competitive in the federal government, but not a lot. Like, there's no partnership track. You're not getting paid a whole lot more. You might become an SES, maybe you get some title, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just not all that. So there really isn't an incentive to want to compete. And so my office, at least, the Environment and Natural Resources Division and the Environmental Defense Section at DOJ, was a very cooperative, communal place. We always chipped in to help each other out. We were always watching each other's backs. And when I went to the law firm, taking that mentality with me, I got eviscerated. I would offer to help, and especially women. I noticed this to be especially true with the women there, that if I offered to help with a project, another associate with a project, they looked at me very suspiciously, like I was trying to steal their client or steal the hours. And I'm like, I'm just trying to help out because I know you need to get home to your kid. So that just the whole mentality of that competition over cooperation did not sit well with me at the law firm.
Yeah, it is too many people let that be just the way it is. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
approach that problem, that challenge, and say, that's just the way it is. Um, but every firm, every office has an opportunity to shift that for them and for their people.
Yep.
And to
Yep.
to give everybody a different experience of the practice of law. Uh,
And it has to start both with the individual and culturally at the firm or the government agency, whatever it
yeah.
is, too. I mean, because the collective firm, the collective government agency, it's all made up of individuals, and so the individuals all need to be doing that work. What was, when you were still working at DOJ, and I know this because I met you when you were still at DOJ, and so I got to see this process unfold for you, but I don't think I know exactly what was your, if there was like an aha moment or a light bulb moment of saying, I want to go do my own thing, start my own thing around leadership.
Yeah. I loved my time at DOJ. It was great. I loved the work. I loved the people. I loved the
Mm-hmm.
mission. And what I realized I was missing was something that I didn't give much thought to from my Army days, because it was so ingrained into everything that we were doing. And that was helping other people grow into their fullness, like into the leaders that they could become. I was the deputy director in my office at Preo. We were When I left, we were a total of 21 people, very flat organization, and limited opportunities to help people explicitly grow into new challenges. And I would be talking with folks outside of the office about challenges that they're facing. I was like, this is what I really need this. This is what I really enjoy doing. And as much as I love ethics, like I love this even more. And it just got to the point where I said, I need to do this. Um, I need, I need to do this because this profession needs it, and I can help with this. And quite frankly, I felt called to help the legal profession be better to itself, to help
Hmm.
people have the experience that they deserve. And the way to do that is to help other people have the experience that they deserve by being a better leader. And I certainly don't think that I'm the only one that can do this, but I did kind of realize that this is the thing that I am supposed to be doing.
This is your zone of genius, which is so apparent from an outsider's perspective, because I'm coming back to some of these seeds we planted. This vision that you have brings in that generosity that you learned from your mom and your teacher. It brings in that servant leadership that you've grown up with, that you've had modeled to you, and that you have modeled to other people throughout the whole course of your career. And it brings in the ethics piece, because for me, good leadership is also ethical leadership, and vice versa. Like, having good ethics will also make you a good leader. And so it just seems that all of these pieces congealed together in a very obvious way. But I know it's not obvious and it's not easy. You started your company, BKG Leadership Coaching, while you were at DOJ, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah. And then how long after you started it did you officially leave DOJ?
I started coaching kind of on the side. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I started coaching on the side in summer of 2022, very much on the side. And then decided by the fall of 22 that this is what I needed to be doing. I got some formal coaching training at Georgetown, and about the time that wrapped up in July of 23, I left DOJ, formalized my business just before that, and kind of left the steady paycheck life behind.
And yeah, that sucks to leave behind. The paycheck and the benefits of the federal government are a definite ouch point to have left behind. But coming back to what we talked about at the top of the conversation about leaping and the net will appear. What has that transition, that shift, been like for you from a stable, lifelong government career to having your own business?
Yeah. So part of it for me is I very much had a net. I've got a military retirement income.
Mm-hmm.
I've got lifelong military health benefits for me and my family because of my
Mm,
military service. And
that's
my
huge.
wife is working. She's a government attorney as well. And so we're going to be okay, even if this.
And you have two kids, right, in private
We've got
school.
we've got two kids at private school in
Yeah,
DC, so
yeah,
it's not like
that
I
ain't
can't
cheap.
work.
Yeah.
Um, but we've got more net than a lot of people in a similar circumstance. The big transition for me that I share with other people is the comfort that I get doing what I'm doing now. And it's not just the autonomy, which I love. I love controlling my own day. Who doesn't love that? But what I most appreciate, I think, and it took me a couple of months to come to this realization, but what I most appreciate is the alignment of my values and what I do every day. I love the Army. I love DOJ. I love the mission of both of those organizations, the people that I got to work with. But every now and then there would be something where it's like, is this how we're going to do it? Like this just doesn't seem like the right way to do whatever it is. But now I know that everything I do because I think it's important and because I think it's the right thing to do and the right way to do it. And so I've got this perfect alignment between my values and my work. And that is super satisfying.
So satisfying because you really are the master of your own autonomy, not just your schedule every day, but you really are every single day crafting the day and the life and the business and the world that you want to have. What would you say to other Gen Xers who are, whether they're satisfied or dissatisfied with their current career, but maybe they've been thinking of doing a side hustle, maybe transitioning into their own business? What advice or kind of insider tips, now looking back over the year of your business, would you share with them in terms of going out on your own?
I, First off, I would say embrace that desire, whatever it looks like. Like, don't shy away from it. Like, really explore it, embrace it. Um, as you said earlier, we are a rebellious lot, and we kind of we're willing to do our own thing. And I think that we all deserve to see what that looks like. And I would say, like we're all a little bit older now, which means we don't have to be quite as impulsive as we used to be. And so we can plan a little bit for that. We can explore and define what this side hustle, new gig, hobby, project is going to look like, and then we can plan for it. And I think that we can combine our adultness with our inherent Gen Xness.
Yep. What's the biggest challenge of starting your own business, especially, in our 40s and 50s?
Oh, there's the obvious thing of like, where's the money going to come from? Like, where are your
Hmm.
clients and whatnot? But the other challenge is external perception. It's hard to acknowledge that sometimes that I can feel judged by the way I think other people are looking at me because I'm giving up a steady paycheck, because I'm doing this kooky coaching thing, because of whatever. And knowing who you are and what's important to you is a little bit of a guard against that. But that is one of the things that's hard about making the leap is that we often think about what is everybody else going to say?
Yep. How much, if at all, do you think that drive you had, especially when you were younger, to prove people wrong factors into your entrepreneurial journey?
Probably too much.
That was a bit of a leading question as a lawyer, I get, but yeah,
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 I think there's a lot to that.
yeah. You almost have to, I think, because being an entrepreneur is so
You,
like antithetical to what people think you quote should be doing. You're like,
absolutely.
I gotta prove them
Well,
wrong.
you have to prove them
Yeah,
wrong because they don't think this is what you should be doing. And um, the reality is, most entrepreneurial businesses do not survive, and so you have to
yeah,
prove the
yep,
numbers wrong. You have to prove the stats
yep.
wrong. Um, and you, in some ways, you really have to embrace that proving it wrong in order to prove it wrong.
Mhm. And I'm going to add to that. I think you also have to embrace or be able to hire a marketer.
Hmm.
You either have to understand that you need to go to school in addition to your substantive training for marketing and copywriting, or hire somebody who does it, because that's what they don't tell you in your substantive coaching schools. They give you a little bit of marketing, like go start an email list and a
But
website. You don't know. Like you're a full-time marketer.
so at a coaching school, they treat business development and marketing the same way law firms treat preparation for making partners. Like, here's a brown bag
Yes.
lunch session.
Yes, exactly. It's horrible. So that's a good segue, and I know we need to kind of start wrapping it up, but I want to give you some time to talk about your business and how it is that you are working with lawyers on that partnership track or just looking to have more responsibility. Um, what is, first of all, where do you like to start with people when they come to you to get coaching?
Yeah. So having worked with folks for a little while, I've kind of structured, I have a framework for how I think about what is going to give them the tools to master their legal practice. And it starts with knowing themselves. This is something that I'm sure you can appreciate. But until you have some sense of your values, your goals, you can't do anything else really at a high level. And you certainly can't lead people at a high level until you know what you are all about. And so um, I, I, depending on individual clients, will the sequencing may be a little bit different after that. But the things that I work with them on are both values based and then some substantive skills. But we work through knowing yourself, managing your calendar, developing trust, delegating work, collaborating, giving useful feedback, not just a sticky note that says thanks, and then working on reputation, networking, and planning for the future. And so that kind of,
That's a
it is a
lot.
lot.
Yeah.
It is a lot. But I like that my general work one-on-one with somebody is over the course of 6 months. And so
Hmm.
we have some time to work together. And so that's my one-on-one work. I also do some speaking and workshops for law firms and legal organizations, highlighting why leadership is important, how to lead from where you sit. As you said earlier, we all are leaders. And so, like, how do I lead from where I sit? That's something that I like to talk to folks about. Um, and I'm starting to do more strategic facilitation. So think law firm executive committee sitting down to sketch out how they're going to succeed as a firm over the next 5 to 10 years, doing some of that strategic planning. Because what I've seen is a lot of organizations write their strategic plan to say we're going to be the best at X. Well, an aspirational goal is not a plan.
Yes.
And so I help them, put their aspirations into action with a plan. Um, so those are kind of the main facets of the work that I'm doing. One of the things that I just in the last 10 days started two new things. One, I'm experimenting with AI, and so I've got an AI coach that I have trained with my thoughts, programs, writings, philosophies, so that it's not just like, here is access to ChatGPT. This is actual dig into Ben's brain while Ben is doing other things.
Oh my God, this is brilliant. I hadn't heard of
So,
this.
so this is brand new. This is like in the last, like I said, in the last 10 days, I've been doing this. It's just now up on my website. I will add,
Is this the little dude in the corner that normally is a chat,
yes,
like
yes,
virtual
right.
chat thing?
So
Because I saw it was Ask Coach
yes.
something.
So on the show notes, you're going to have a link to this
Yes.
page,
Hmm.
to a page I set up specifically for you, and on that page will be
Yep.
a chat bot. It's called Lex Coach AI. But you can play with it and see what it's like to get coached by Ben Grimes without talking to me.
That is so cool. I'm actually going to try that because I didn't click on it when I was looking through the
Yeah.
website. And I do want to mention that and this will be in the show notes, but it's bkgleadershipcoaching.com/GenX.
Yes.
And so you'll see the little chatbot on there, which sounds amazing. I didn't know that that was a thing. And I just want to come back. My reaction when I said that's a lot. that was a reflection of that's a lot that goes into leadership that I don't think most people are thinking about. Everything from the calendaring to all of those softer
Mm.
skills, so to speak, of how you become a better leader on that track to partner or more responsibility. And on the link that you sent us that we're going to send folks to, you have several different options.
Yeah.
You kind of start with, there's an assessment. It's called the Leadership Constellation Assessment.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us briefly what that is?
So the leadership constellation is number one, it's free, so go check it out. And this is a really simple, easy to do assessment of leadership skills, competencies, characteristics that are important to you in your role right now. And what it does is gives you clarity on what's important and offer in that process helps you to focus on where to put your energy to improve right now. And an easy download, and I hope everybody checks that out. The other thing that's brand new that's on there is a partner success audit. This is very new, and this is something I'm offering um, to lawyers, either brand new partners or senior associates who are looking to be partners, or really anybody who is in a position where they want some neutral and confidential feedback on how they're doing as a leader or manager. And that is a survey that you'll do for me. I will review it and then give you personalized video feedback on the order of like a 45 to 60-minute video feedback on where I see your strengths and opportunities for growth as a leader and actionable tips to make a difference in your leadership right now.
Mm. That sounds so insightful and safe in terms of this is something that somebody can do with you and nobody else in their firm or their job has to know that they're doing it. It's not a 360 or anything like that. So there's kind of a low risk with the potential of a lot of return on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I
I
mean
love that
that's the
idea.
idea,
Yeah.
and because I know that many folks, lawyers especially, are sensitive to how they're perceived within the workplace.
Yes.
And
Yep.
sometimes you don't want people to know that you're reaching out for help or that you're looking to grow.
Yep.
Or sometimes your organization or the people that you're working with have no expectation that you're going to grow, but you want to. And getting that help outside the firm or outside your organization is sometimes what you need to do.
That sounds so powerful, really. And honestly, I know you're targeting lawyers, and I think that everything on your website would be applicable to anybody in any profession or not even a profession. Again, if we're talking about leadership in all facets of your life, if you want to be a better leader at church or just in your home with your kids and your significant other, or with your dog, whatever it is, I think these are skills that would benefit everybody across the
Yeah,
board.
for sure.
Give me a sense, because you said people who want to do this, and I think that's the key. People have to both want and recognize that this is a growth edge for them. So ideally, who are the types of people, kind of your ideal clients, people that are best suited for this kind of work?
My ideal client is a new law firm partner who is going into the role or is just gotten into the role, and they're looking around and they're saying, I did not expect this, but I want to succeed. That's who I work with.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of those out there that are like, oh shit, I'm a partner. There's so much more to this than I
Yeah.
thought, and I'm completely
And
unprepared.
they
And
want to
so,
succeed without burning down the rest of their lives.
yes, yep, yep, absolutely. Anything else you want to say about the business? We're going to start to wrap it up and move into a lightning round, but anything else about your business or your transition into entrepreneurship that we didn't cover?
No, no. I hope people check it out and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm out there, so would love to connect with
Yes,
folks.
and yeah, let's make sure and give you a shout out. So, tell everybody where they can find you on LinkedIn.
You can search for me at Ben Grimes, as Ben Grimes, on LinkedIn.
And your website is bkgleadershipcoaching.com. And again, our special landing page for the podcast is /GenX after that. And you have a 15% off discount code. So if anybody listening wants to come to you, especially those young law firm partners, to do some work, the code for 15% off is GenX Shift 15. And of course, all that'll
Yeah,
be in the show notes. And I really appreciate you providing that. So let's move into a lightning
let's do it.
round real quick. What is your fondest Gen X childhood memory?
Oh gosh. As we were going into this, this is probably not it, but as we were going into the lightning round, the only thing I could think of was no whammies, big bucks and no
Oh,
whammies. That
why is that so
I don't
popular?
know.
I love that too. That show, the No Whammies, it really is hugely popular.
That's the only thing I could think of. That is a pretty crappy best Gen X memory, but it's the first thing I thought of.
I love it. There's a reason you thought of it first. I love it. No whammies. And we talked about sort of your biggest piece of advice for Gen Xers wanting to make maybe an entrepreneurial shift, but what's your biggest piece of advice for Gen Xers making wanting to make any kind of shift in their lives?
Yeah, like get to know yourself. Um, that's it. Get to know yourself. It's like every movie we ever watched growing up was about getting to know yourself. Like now it's your turn.
Yep. That journey. That journey. It's the hero, the heroine's journey of coming back to the truth of who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Favorite Gen X era word or phrase?
Oh man. I have no. Why are you asking such hard questions?
Didn't I give these to you ahead of time? Maybe I didn't.
Oh my
I
God.
think you might be the first person that I haven't given the questions to ahead of time, which is pretty poetic given that you're a lawyer, so you should be able to think
I
on your
should
feet,
be.
Ben Grimes.
Okay. Favorite Gen X phrase is I don't have one. Oh my gosh. I'm so
No
embarrassed.
whammies? Can we be lame and just give you no whammies? You are not
Oh my
representing the
gosh.
generation very well
I'm not.
today.
All right, hit me.
Dude. Okay, well, if something comes to you, let me know. We'll come back to that one. But I don't know. You don't instill me with a lot of confidence for this next one. Favorite Gen X theme song for your life?
Oh, anything by either. Well, let me anything by either Duran Duran or Wham
Duran Duran? Oh man,
or Tears for
I'm in such
Fears
the minority.
or Tears for Fears.
Okay, I see. Man, Duran Duran and Tears for Fears are the two 80s bands that I just never got into. Now, so
This is
I'll stand in
over. This
solidarity with you
conversation
on
is
Wham.
over.
I know.
You
I
don't
don't
like
know
Tears for
why. Their
Fears?
music, the music just didn't do anything
Oh
for
my
like it didn't speak to my soul. It didn't, and the words of American Bandstand and Dick Clark, like it didn't like make me want to get up and dance. Didn't have a groovy beat that I could
oh
dance
my
to for some
gosh.
reason. So I know, but to each his
Oh
own.
my
Like if
gosh.
that's what does it
All
for
right.
you, is there a particular Tears for Fears song that resonates with
I
you?
like the second album. I mean, Songs from the Big Chair is a great album. Shout, of course, is a great song, but I think I like Sowing the Seeds of Love off the second album better.
Mm,
It's
hmm
it's
That makes sense.
it's got that kooky Sergeant Pepper feel to it,
Yeah,
but in
yeah.
an '80s synth way.
Yeah. And I'm about to say something that's probably going to get me excommunicated from this country, let alone Gen X. I am also not a Beatles fan, so when you say like Sgt. Pepper, like the music just didn't do anything for me, and I don't know why. I wish I did. I'm also not a Dave Matthews fan. Like there's just some
Yeah,
music that it just didn't, and I'm like, I recognize the brilliance of it, and I'm like, eh.
yeah. So who's your favorite '80s band?
Oh, dude, I can't pick a favorite 80s. I'm such a music uh I don't know what the word like music file. I'm
Okay.
obsessed with music. Except for like today's country and today's pop and that kind of beer and lifestyle kind of music. But it's hard for me to pick a favorite because it's very mood
Mm,
dependent. But when I think of the 80s and I think of riding around drunk in my friend Jenny's Ford Tempo in Lexington, I think of The Cure, New
mhm.
Order, a
Oh.
lot of Rob Bass at parties and DJs. So yeah, it just depends
Nice.
on
I
the
did a
mood
lip
and the
sync of
scene.
DJ Rob Bass and Easy Rock. My brother and I did a lip sync of that at a church talent contest or a church lip sync karaoke something or other. Uh,
How is that not a favorite childhood memory?
that was pretty good. That was pretty good.
It's awesome. Okay, and last one. What are you most proud of being a Gen Xer?
I am most proud of the fact that I made such great friends. Like I still have great friends from that era. You know, I think that growing up Gen X was different and it was meaningful. And I'm really proud and appreciative of the folks that I'm still connected with from way back then.
I agree with that too. I have so many childhood friends that I'm still very much connected with from that time period. I think we all went through something together that binds us in a way maybe like unlike other generations. So, well, I'm really glad that we may not be childhood friends, but now we're adult friends and we get to be on this entrepreneurial journey together. I learned so much from you and your wisdom and how you're doing your business. And I love your views on leadership and what you're doing within the legal profession. So I'm so grateful to you and for spending this time together
Well,
today.
I am appreciative of your time because this has been super fun.
Good, good. Glad to hear it. All right. Thanks, Ben. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I enjoyed participating in it. Ben's story is so inspiring and compelling into how we can develop our leadership skills in all areas of our life. But if you're somebody who is on that partnership track, or you're just looking to take on more responsibility as a lawyer, please reach out to Ben because I know that he's going to help you cultivate the leadership skills that you need and want. I know my big takeaway from this was the 4 questions that we could all start asking each other, both our colleagues and our friends, to develop a better, deeper sense of connection. And so I want to ask those questions of you right now. Hey, Gen Xer, how you doing? What have you been working on lately? How's that going for you? And is there any way that I can be of help? Let me know your responses to those questions so that we can connect better. You can send me an email at podcast@lifefromthesummit.com. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify, and leave a review if this show landed for you, and let me know what your big takeaways are. So until next time, stay gold, Gen Xers.